Hi, everybody. My name is Jason Scott. I work for the Internet Archive. My official position is free-range archivist. And what that basically means is I kind of do what I want when I want all the time, and they hope that whatever comes out of me isn't embarrassing to the archive in too great a fashion. And also that I kind of communicate with people for whom they don't know what the Internet Archive is, or maybe they have an idea and it's kind of weird and they're not sure where they're going to go with it. And also sometimes people don't recognize the value of things they're holding, or recognize it and think nobody shares those values. So that's kind of been where I go about it. And before I start any of this thing, first of all, just two very quick caveats, having watched the beginning of the program. You'll see things that are kind of overlapping from one speaker to another. We didn't collude, so that usually means that either it's really important or that it's something that should be on your minds in terms of, wow, they all kind of addressed it from their own position. And also, I'd like to apologize for the fact that my president is a moronic toolbox. I'd really like to apologize for that because he's applying this kind of bizarre existential threat to freedom, democracy, people's lives, and that's when something like preserving games or websites seems like you're really rearranging deck chairs. In fact, you're having a meeting about a committee to form to talk about what deck chairs need to be arranged. But it's you know, if we don't function under oppression, under a certain situation, then we have no idea the strength of what we're working on. So for me, it's a matter of, you know, heading forward, focusing on what I think I know I can do, and I'm just really proud to work for the Internet Archive in this particular time, and I'm very glad that we chose this country as the first major mirror of the Internet Archive. So that's going to be very exciting. Anyway, so archive.org looks like this to most people. It's a website that's kind of clean looking and has something called the Wayback Machine, which to some people that's what we are. We are the Wayback Machine, the way to get to your old embarrassing website or your friend's old embarrassing website. And actually it looks like this. And so my boss, Brewster Kahle, bought this building because, for this important reason, it looked like the logo. There's a real sense of whimsy that goes about it. And I want to point out, this was a man who made hundreds of millions of dollars selling a company that he then could have just created a jet ski and gone around in a pool of caviar all day in front of his mansion, right? He could have sat there and watched black helicopters fight to the death while drinking Mai Tais made from endangered species. But instead, right, he said, I want to be a librarian. And I will tell you, honestly, from, no joke, unlike a lot of people who are rich and invest in some idea, he's there every morning, 7, 8 in the morning, and he's there till 7 or 8 almost every night, being a librarian, focused on how do I bring the most amount of information to the most amount of people at no cost, and how do I help save as much of American and worldwide culture as possible and provide it to people. That is amazing to me. That's just having that FU money sitting in a bag behind you the whole time you do it. I don't know how many of us could hold that out, but he's been doing it now, as of basically last year, for 20 years. And it's just amazing. Anyway, that's an accomplishment beyond any bit. This is what the inside of the building looks like. Super efficient. This is the world's most inefficient data center you've ever seen. Over there in the corner, those are our servers. Each one of those is 2 petabytes of data. They blink. We get 3 or 4 million visitors a day to our various bits. We have a fully working pipe organ. I think we're the only current library with a fully working pipe organ. If you work at the archive for 4 years, we give you a little tiny statue of yourself because, as Brewster said, we don't have stock options. So we have these. There's Sam, isn't that great? Anyway, and of course our servers look like this, but actually they look like this when they're working because I was doing light painting one night. On the archive itself, you go, and this is kind of the interface a lot of people see. Like, these are a bunch of texts from various sources, and you can see like who's read them, and you click on them, and you can read them. And we have all sorts of partners who work with us and provide us with data, and we provide them with data. It is really our vision to bring as much of things to people. Like, if it's out there and it exists, we're either working on it, or we're trying to understand it, or we're trying to figure out if we can contribute to it, or if something's out there, we'll just grab a copy and put it up. And if you go to our site, you can just kind of read a book, right? It just comes up in your web page. Of course, you can download it, but you can actually flip through it immediately. So the time from I wonder what a book on violins is to reading the violins is instantaneous. And we took pictures using cameras so that they go in really nicely. So obviously we'll never replace a book, but to be there, that fidelity, you can get like really close and get a lot of the experience. And we try to do it non-destructively, and we use this non-destructive scanner. In fact, the Internet Archive is scanning 1,000 books a day into the Internet Archive. So if it's not there today, check next week. And we're also doing 78 RPM records, utilizing multiple styluses for the different styluses that were used. And that work continues at an incredible pace. So the 78 RPM records, we're putting up hours and hours of these things every week. And when we present it to you, again, it's boom, I want to listen to this album. There it is. There's the recording. There's the download. In other words, we believe very strongly that access drives preservation, that if you don't let the end user immediately get to the things they want and experience it, and if you say, trust us, there's a warehouse, you're going to get less funding, less attention, and people aren't going to believe you. But if we're like, here's 1 million records, try one out, that they'll have a much stronger connection to it. And that works with the web archives, that works with the movies and the music and everything else that we have. Boom, you get right to the stuff, right? Obviously, we have our beautiful movies and everything else that you can get to. And of course, it's not a matter of, and I think this is also important, we're not really kind of basing it on like some sort of curatorial gatekeeping. Like that's not really our gig. Like we're not going to tell you that a Kix commercial from 1953 or a Coca-Cola commercial shouldn't or should be on there. We try to keep it super open. Does that mean a lot of garbage? Yes, it does. But it also means that there's stuff that we didn't even know was important to people, and 5 years later someone says, you know, you have the only copy left. You know, obviously this stuff is very easy to kind of sell to some folks, but the weirder stuff is the stuff people don't know about, like the TV News Archive, which we've done our best to let people know about, but if you go to the TV News Archive, archive.org/TV, type in a word, we'll show you every time that word has been mentioned and recorded in closed captioning on a television news program, mostly in America, since 2009. And it's used extensively by groups like The Daily Show and John Oliver and other areas, and Rachel Maddow uses it a lot now to be able to find things people said. We have every recording of that time that, you know, for instance, Bill O'Reilly said, so you can go back and find out how creepy he was. Or you can go and find everything Trump said, and you can find everything that was said during the debates. And let me just say very quickly, we thought the debates were going to be, we thought the whole presidential election last year was going to be this intelligent interaction of parties, and we built all this functionality to analyze all the positions, and we just didn't know it was going to be this steamrolling shit show of nothing. But it's there, it's waiting for the next time. Anyway, you're able to type in a word and see everything. All right, let's just quickly go. Obviously, the Wayback Machine, you can get the Wayback Machine. That's the one most people know. In fact, some people just call us the Wayback Machine. You type in a web page, and we can absolutely show it to you. Over here, we have a Save Page Now feature. So if you see something, save something. You can actually type in the URL, and we'll grab it immediately, instantaneously, and make it available. Anyway, so we have all this stuff kind of going on, and all these different projects going on. And so when Brewster hired me in 2011, I was already known as kind of a mess maker in all various projects I've done. And he said, you know, we really did good with the movies, the music, and the web. We didn't do so good with software. Can you do something about software? And I wanted to have the same philosophy that we have with everything else. I want to be able to play it. Why can't we play the software, he said, not knowing what beast he had unleashed. So what we have now is we have software at the Internet Archive, where we believe we are the largest software archive of available online material in the world. And if you find me a bigger one, I will download it and put it on us. Okay? But most importantly, there's this functionality in there, and where you have a program and you can hit that, and it will bring up a JavaScript run emulator in the browser, which is hardly a big reveal now. We've been talking about it all morning. But this was 4 years of work. A lot of amazing people worked on it. It's a port primarily of MAME initially, the multi-arcade machine emulator. But now it's kind of moved into having 4 or 5 other emulators that it supports. There's one for the old school Macintosh. There's one for DOS and certain variations of DOS and Windows 3.1. And we're just going to keep moving with that. We have ones for the Commodore coming up. We have ones for the Amiga that are up. And the idea here was, let's get all of the software up immediately, okay? And let's put it all up there just like we did with movies, music, and books. So where I am right now, I had to deal for a couple years with that is impossible, don't do it, you won't be able to do it if you do it, and if you did it, you made a mistake. And it turns out just ignoring all that has worked out pretty well. The Internet Archive has somebody booting up something basically every second up in our software archive. People are deriving value for it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about where I am, because this was stuff that we've now been doing for about 2 or 3 years now. We've put up arcade games, we've put up console games, we've put up computers. It's all up there. It's a living, breathing part of the internet and the world. What does that mean? Because, like I said, I'm really out of the I hope you appreciate what I'm doing business, and I'm definitely out of the I hope you approve of what I'm doing business. I'm absolutely in the guess what just happened today business, and guess what just happened last year business. So, like I said, we put up a massive amount of arcade games. We put up 1,050 arcade games that turned out to flip the world out. Right now it's 675 because it turned out some people didn't want us to put their games up, but we found that out by them writing us letters, and we said, we're sorry, and we went back. And some of these are incredibly weird games that just don't have any marquee image even, because they were just circuit boards that the MAME team have dumped and worked with. Like, there are obscure games here that probably never saw much love, and now they're getting hundreds of thousands of people making them live again. And they also are for things like the ZX Spectrum, which we see here. This is absolutely this amazing weird program and all these different variations that you have where people are able to bring the program up, interact with it, and live with it. And people, the screenshots are the weirdest part, because those are being generated automatically by a machine I have. All it does is boot up a program, take random screenshots, declare this the most complicated one, the good one, makes that the flagship, and goes on. So I have people who are like, wow, this one doesn't work as well. Did you notice that? I'm like, no human being has ever looked at that. You are the first one. We need you to fix it. And yes, that means there's a virtual machine somewhere at the Internet Archive that does nothing but play games all day and wants you to shoot it and take it out of its misery. So where am I? Where I'm now, I'm like, close the friggin' air gap. That's all I care about right now. I am trying to acquire as much magnetic and optical media as possible and put it up on the archive as fast as possible. As a result, we have put up, at this point, 10,000 CD-ROM images. And we don't care. We're not going for like, oh, this famous commercial program. We're putting up Windows drivers diskettes. We're putting up initial floppies that were handed to you to get onto AOL in 1994. You know, we don't care. We're like, bring it all online. We'll figure out what it's worth later, because that decision can't be made in 20, 30 years about, oh, it turns out America Online had the cure to cancer. That is a very unlikely scenario. But the pure sliver keeps me driven on, all right? And, you know, you may or may not buy into it as an art, you know, as a certain technical person, whatever. There's certainly an aesthetic to it that I absolutely love, and I think that comes from nostalgia and love. You know, there's a certain feeling of rendering 3D in a 2D environment and the kind of handmade craft that we're now seeing again in certain pockets, like certain mobile games or certain kinds of web-based programs. But there's just a beauty into this digital world that's just very interesting, and it informs an entire range of material that's coming down the line, right? That people can choose from in the same way that they would look at old medieval paintings and discover things about light, or look at old cookbooks and learn things about what animals live somewhere. There's all this sideways value that's just amazing that I think is going to come from software. We just made a little mistake with software. We thought of software as a commercial product instead of a cultural product. We just did that for about 20, 30 years. I'm sorry, we did that. And we're in a certain situation right now, and the best way to think of it is People don't quite know what software is. Like some people really do. I mean, obviously, Roberto, my buddy out there at the Software Heritage Foundation in France, there are people who have now recognized that we have to get this stuff. And the way that I describe it is to say, imagine with paintings that we didn't discover that paintings were kind of important until the 70s. Let's just say that they were thought of as like placemats. They were just placemats for your wall, and you just were like, yeah, I have some, and I've got them up, and I got this old placemat. It's kind of cool, but and suddenly people were like, it turns out paintings have this kind of cultural meaning. They're kind of nice. What would you do? Well, it turns out, if you take the metaphor, some people will sit around and say, whither paintings? What part do they play? Won't the old artists get mad that we're taking their paintings? Can we even display them publicly? What will we do? And some of us people are just driving around with trucks going, got any paintings in your attic? Put them in our truck. And I think that we're in that truck phase. We're just driving around going like, do you have a lot of old things? Yes, I do. Well, guess what? The sad story that you didn't have an ending to of once I was young, I kept a bunch of my old crap, and now I don't know what to do with it, has a happy ending, and then I gave it to a museum. So it's actually working out really well. Just recently, we just put out a call for Apple II software, and I'm getting contacted by schools who are like, we have a basement of it. Do you want it? And I'm like, yes, I want it. And so we're imaging them and putting them up. And it turns out educational software is evergreen. It turns out that actually a well-designed piece of educational software, it doesn't matter what crap platform it was on. It doesn't matter if it's gone. A thing that teaches a young child how to add is still as functionally green and beautiful and functional to teaching them on an Apple II emulated in a browser as it was on an Apple II on a green screen in 1978. It just turns out that works. And I will tell you that the Internet Archive's #1 program with a bullet is Oregon Trail, and that a person boots up Oregon Trail at the Internet Archive in web-based emulation every 8 seconds, 24 hours a day, and that it is part of the required, and I'm saying the Internet Archive, boot it in your window, version is part of the required syllabus of multiple elementary schools throughout the US. Like, it is once again part of the cultural landscape as a living, breathing thing. And they could not care less that we ported JavaScript from Inscription-based C++. Like, they could not care less. They just know there's a URL, they hand it to each other, and the thing lives again. And they can put it on every computer in the computer lab, instead of what I was literally being told, which is they would have it on one computer and 30 kids would scream at one kid about where to buy which oxen. What a hellish life. People are like very, like I said, this recognition of software as an important cultural artifact to me is like just like the fundamental mental leap you have to do, right? Because like basically we have games, business software, we have software that drove machines, software that referenced other software, things that did catalogs. We even have whole, I've had to do a quick version of Rick's journey from let's go get all the professional stuff to what about the stuff nobody ever distributed to anyone? Like people would kind of tinker around on their own home stuff and make neat stuff. I'm going after those people because there's only 1 or 2 copies of that, as opposed to, in the Apple II world, it's Choplifter, and in the arcade world, it's, say Ms. Pac-Man. These other programs that are like important parts of the landscape in terms of what happens when just folks use something, like literally the software folklore. Like we're moving down to the software folklore now. Like just give me all your old stuff and they'll give me 1,000 disks. We'll image the 1,000 disks. A lot of it will be awful and some of it will be amazing. And we don't know. We don't make the judgment. It all just goes up and it's so tiny. Where we're going next with the Internet Archive is like right now we have a player. And I'll say that the most unexpected thing to happen with the Internet Archive is we have unintentionally become a mid-1980s support line. And what that means is, like, I will get a mail from somebody who's like, on the 3rd level, I'm expecting more attacks from this kind of ship, but it's only giving me half of what I would expect, and I feel like I got the difficulty setting wrong. Do you have any ideas what I can do here? And I'll tell you, the front desk at the archive is like, Jason! They don't even process it. That's Laurel and Salem and Chris, they're all just like, Jason. But I also get people who are like, I have old things. Do you want them? I have old developer code. I have old manuals. Do you want it? It's become a living, breathing thing to them. And we did a thing that is insane, which is on the DOS versions, we used to get a complaint. People were playing RPGs and other long-form games, closing their browser, opening them up again, and the game wasn't the same. And they were very unhappy about this. Now, normally you would say, well, go ahead, go find the unicorn that craps ice cream cones too. I'm sure he has a copy for you. But we fixed it, and we turned it into a persistent file system. And so there are people, they are really doing this. We're watching them do it in some light manner because they thank us at the end. We don't log anything. Who are like, yeah, I've been playing your game for about 4 months now. And every time they boot up their browser, it's waiting for them with the next, they unload it. Where are we going next? I'd like to have us finally move to being able to put in disk images and put them out. What that means is and the technology is sitting there, we just want to make sure everything's cool and clean and ready, but we're going to have it that you basically click on an icon and it saves the file system and you store it locally, and then when you're ready to program it on again, you load it back in again. In other words, virtual, ubiquitous, infinite microcomputers on every platform for all of time. Other than that, make the place look a little better. Thank you very much.